Okay, so thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be talking about personalization and relevancy and target audiences and all that kind of stuff that we dig down on when we're looking at data. And it really does work when you are looking at the data that is coming back in from your campaigns. You're able to use that to make decisions about who it is that you want to target going forwards. So if somebody's registering on your website, it makes a lot of sense to research that person and then try and find other companies that look like that profile. Where I find that a lot of value can be added to that process is in the detail. So the standard parameters that people look for are going to be the size of the company, the description of that company. It's going to be the things like the location of the business, stuff like that. However, there are a lot of other variables that you can use to find that diamond in the rough. For instance, if you're able to find out how many followers on Twitter that company has, and if they're within a specific range, then they may be a perfect customer for you. Your customers may have between 1,000 and 5,000 followers on Twitter, for instance. Now, what that means is that you can go backwards, so you can find all the companies that have got between 1,000 and 5,000 followers on Twitter, and then you can try and enhance that data to find contact information. And that contact information is what you then use to go out and do your prospecting. So you can go backwards once you've got an idea of who your best profile is. Then you can work it through like that. Another example would be a really good one is around technology. So if, for instance, a client of yours or a prospect comes to your website and registers and they use a solution like Salesforce, you know that they're using a CRM, you know that they're using Salesforce, and they've also got another solution. Maybe it's something like Guestline, which is one that I've just recently done. What you've actually got here is a combination of technologies that one of your clients is using, and that combination of technologies could help you find other companies that may need your services. All you need to do is find a list of companies that use Salesforce and Guestline in conjunction with each other, figure out what problem it was that your client was having, and then go out to market and find other companies that look like that. Now, we use a lot of different tools in order to identify what I suppose in order to add variables to the data. We probably access a dozen APIs, I would have thought. APIs are where machines are talking to machines rather than humans talking to machines. So if I just give you some context on that, a human talking to a machine would work through a user interface, like, for example, Google Chrome and a website. A machine talking to a machine doesn't need to do that. It can use something called an API, which is a doorway straight into that computer's I suppose whether it's a program that you're accessing or whether it's a database you're accessing, that API can help you do that using something called endpoints. So if you've got a company name and you want information about that company, instead of going to a website and looking it up, you can get that information programmatically using an API if you have the right endpoint. So, for instance, an endpoint would be company name email movers limited, and company's house endpoint would be, can you tell me the SIC code for it? So that would return the SIC code for that company. The nice thing about APIs is that you can do hundreds and hundreds of thousands over a period of time if it's unlimited, rather than being limited by a person on a keyboard doing it manually for you, or even something scraping a site. APIs are designed to carry that type of volume, so they're really good. And as long as you've got the right endpoints, the amount of information you can get back is really interesting. So the way in which we developed Contact Enhance, for instance, was to access these endpoints that would give us information using, for instance, a domain. I think it was the domain name that we settled on eventually instead of the company name, because the domain, when you are using the domain as a unique identifier, it's very reliable, because the format of a domain is much better than the format of a company name. Company name could be spelled Email Movers Limited, and the limited bit could be LIMITED, or it could also be LTD. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there, whereas with a domain name, it can only be written emailmovers.com, which means that structure is safe. It's a much safer bet than the company name. So we eventually decided to use that as the unique identifier. So normally when we start to try and find information about a company, we will look for their domain first, and then we will use the domain in our API calls to try and find information about that company, in theory, about that domain. And the information we can find is significant. I mean, I probably focused on Contact Enhance for a couple of years, maybe 18 months, and a lot of that was looking at APIs. And you actually can get quite excited with this stuff that comes back in. Not everybody's cup of tea, I get that, but there are solutions like SEO Moz, for example, which will tell you how much traffic that domain is getting. I think there's also a similar solution called Alexa, which ranks companies' websites by traffic. So you can look at companies that are either getting a lot of traffic or not getting much traffic, and then you can make decisions about how you're going to talk to those prospects in your funnel. So, for instance, you may change the wording of your email to say that you're aware they're getting a lot of traffic. Traffic has been increasing, and this is what you can do to help them manage that. Or we can see you're not getting much traffic, or your traffic is reducing. We can help you with that. Something that we looked at recently is that there's real hidden value in this information as well, because when information comes back in, sometimes you can find a return has got a lot of information. So an API call will return a lot of information about a particular domain, but then sometimes it returns nothing. It's literally silent. And that can actually speak volumes. It can tell you a little bit, it can tell you a lot about that company. For instance, we recently switched from using an API to using a slightly different tool to scan around 300,000 websites from our database. We did this this week. And what we saw is that a lot of those websites were coming back in. So the information on those websites, so we would go to the website with a tool that we'd created. We would ask that website for information, and it would return a file. And that file is everything that's on page one of that website, including the meta name, the meta description, the meta title, meta keywords. And meta keywords are typically used to identify or to help that website be found on a search engine. Or by search engines, and then ranked and structured. So what we did is we actually saw that about 30% of the websites coming back had no meta information whatsoever. So there was no meta description, no meta title, no meta keywords, which means that those companies have not invested any resources in SEO, which means that they could therefore be potential prospects for an SEO company. You can see how the email might read. We can see that you have, we can see that your website has got very little SEO on it. We can see, in fact, that you've got no SEO keywords. You're familiar with the importance of SEO keywords to Google and all of these other search engines. If not, maybe we can help you in a discovery call to book your call. Click here. You can see how that could turn into a lead. And actually, that was actually no information coming back that gave us that intelligence. Something else that we saw, which was really interesting, and this is something that everybody should be aware of, is how many websites were coming back with no HTTPS connection. And HTTPS is so important now. And we were thinking, as we were looking at this, that it was around 20% of the websites were coming back saying that there was no HTTPS connection. So anything you do on that website is insecure or not secure, which means any information that you pass through that website or you enter to that website could be viewed by another person. And it's very easy to view that information, especially if you're browsing from public Wi-Fi. So if you're in Costa, or if you happen to be out and about at an exhibition, you've got your mobile phone, you go to a website and it's a HTTP connection rather than HTTPS. Number one, you're going to be warned not to put anything into that website by most modern browsers like Chrome, but also you are going to be potentially in trouble if you do, because your information could be viewed by anybody, and that is obviously very risky. So that gives you a little bit of an idea as to what it is that we've been working on this week. So we've been working information forwards and backwards. So get the information that we want, those that we've identified in prospects, and work backwards from that to find contact details for those companies. So a company that uses Guestline, so we know they use Guestline, we know they use Salesforce, and then work backwards to figure out who those companies are, who the right person is to talk to, and then approach them on an account-based marketing level, that kind of thing. So there you go for this week. I hope you enjoyed that. You can follow me obviously here on YouTube by clicking in the subscribe button. If you do, don't forget to check the notifications bell so you get alerted when a new video comes out. Try and do them every Friday. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, the email guy, and on Twitter, Duncan Gledhill, and of course my blog, Duncan Gledhill, and on Facebook. So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments or reach out to me on any one of those networks, and I will see you next Friday. Thank you for listening.